Well, my clock is going off for 7 o'clock, so let me click this. This is scanning and restoring old photos. Now, I want to show you before we get into this very far that I've added comments down here at the bottom with internet links. And I think all of the websites that I may be visiting are on this list. So don't feel like you have to write down web pages as we go, because those links should be available right here. Now,
Okay.
when we think about scanning and restoring old photos. Oh, I got something I got to get rid of here. Okay. When we think about scanning and restoring old photos, there's several things that come to mind. The first is to understand what your goal is, because your goal will drive the choices that you make along the way. Is it simply to capture and preserve the photos that you have, keep them from degenerating further? Do you want to restore to original form as best you can? Do you want to make it better than it ever was before? And with the software that we have now, especially working with tone and contrast, and now sometimes being able to colorize, you can make these photos do things that the people that took them never would have believed was possible. Do you want to print? How big do you want to print? That will have a lot to say with the resolution. Resolution is one of the most complicated topics, and we'll spend some time on that. The other is how much time and money are you willing to invest? You may need to get a different scanner, and you soon find out that this is a slow process. Now, the scanner that I have, I'm going to pull my camera up and I'm going to show it to you here, and then I'm going to talk about it on the internet. It's an Epson V600. And whoa, I'm kind of tied in between my microphone cord and my scanner. This is a wild ride, huh? Whoop. There's the scanner. Now, what I want you to see most, when I open the lid, this has got a panel that you can pull out, and there is a light in the top of the lid, so that if you're scanning photos, you just leave the cover in and it works like any other scanner. But if you're got slides, or if you have film, you can take that out and this will shine through that. Now I'm going to try and put this back. And show you that it comes with a guide for holding film, and also another guide that's for slides on one side and film strips on the other. To tell you the truth, I don't use the guides. If I only have a couple slides to scan, I'll just throw them in on top of the glass. Now you've seen it. I'm going to put this camera back, and hopefully it will stay where I put it, and we won't need to mess with it anymore. But I did want you to see it, because that lid is a really cool feature. Now, there are a number of different scanners that you can choose from, and some of them are made specifically for photos. Now, I'm going to pull up the website for the scanner you just saw. When I bought it several years ago, it was $70. Now it's $250. But note the resolution. This is the optical resolution. We're going to look later at the interface. And from the interface, you would think that it had higher resolution than this, but optical resolution is what really matters, because that's how big you can get. There are other features in these that we're going to cover. Everything from digital ice. This is a USB 2 Now, if you can find a USB 3, it's going to move the information a lot faster. But this is a really quite functional, modestly priced scanner. Uh, they have a more expensive scanner. There's always something more expensive. But yeah, this one is their $1,100 scanner. I don't really understand why anyone would buy this because the resolution is not any better. Yes, it's got some additional software features with it, and it's a little wider in the light underneath. But if you were doing primarily scans of slides, I would get this instead. This is a Optitech film scanner, and it has all kinds of features to help you get better scans. I'm going to go over a couple of them. One is a really good film scanner will be capable of taking multiple passes over your image at different light intensities, much like you would do if you were exposure stacking and then building an HDR. The other thing that some have a better color range than other, but I'm looking for where it talks about dust and scratches. Now, this is known commonly as ICE, ICE. You'll see this on a lot of different scanners. What it does is it scans in 4 colors. It adds an infrared channel. This is fairly common. And the dust and scratches tend to show up in the infrared channel. And then it uses that information to mark those areas on your slide or on the scanned image, and then content aware fill those out so that it's cleaning up the garbage on your film. Yeah, it's a positive thing when it works. It can be too aggressive, and you've got to be comfortable. You've got to be careful with it. Now, I have another scanner. I'm going to show that to you briefly here. It's an older slide scanner. Nikon used to make these things. And the reason that this is significant is, number one, I've got one. And if you need to borrow it, you should talk to me. It's only 4,000 dot per inch, but you probably won't notice that difference on most of your slides because we're going to be talking about resolution here in a little bit. It's got ICE, it does color reconstruction, it does a lot of things, and most important of all, it has a feeder because scanning this stuff is pretty slow. This Optech scanner at 7,200 dots per inch, it's going to take 40 seconds to 2 minutes per slide. And if you're running one and then you're waiting and you're running another, you're going to be doing a lot of babysitting. And this feeder that comes with this one, even though it's not as high a resolution, it'll stack 50 slides and work through them while you go to the refrigerator and come back, 40 minutes later or an hour later, which is a real time saver. If you've got, a half dozen slides, who cares? But if you've got a couple thousand or more, like we had when we bought this, having something that will work unattended is just a huge advantage. What we need to look at next is the interface. Oh, a word about handling the scanner. Any scanner you got, especially one like this, flatbed, they're very fragile. This thing is working in, 6,400 dots per inch. You can screw it up by jamming it around. There is a mirror lock on almost all flatbed scanners. Never pick up the scanner or jar it around, not even to put it from one desk to the next without locking that mirror, or you can ruin your scanner. Let's look at the interface for the Epson. And it should be right down here. Here it is. Okay. The reason for pulling this up is because it's going to be pretty typical of any interface you work, and you want to be able to see what the sorts of settings are. Now, I've got this in professional mode. Of course, they've got dummy modes, but leave it here. You can set it for reflective, like for a print, or for film, where the light will come on the lid and shine through it. You can set the kind of exposure you want for photo or document. And then there's the image type color. Now, when I saw this, I saw a 24-bit color. Wow, that's pretty cool. My camera's only 16-bit or 14-bit, and then it gets interpolated to 16 when I get it in Lightroom. That's not what this means. These guys say 24-bit, they mean 3 times 8-bit. This is like a JPEG, but they're counting each of the channels separately. So it's what we would call 8-bit color. They're calling 24-bit color. If you want to scan in 16-bit, you need to select 48-bit color, which will give you 3 16-bit channels. Now, if you're scanning monochrome images, you might be tempted to go down here and do a grayscale. Don't. Scan your monochrome images in color. Now, you can probably get away with 24-bit color on most monochrome images, but it doesn't hurt to go to 48. It just doubles the size of your file. The reason for that is that a lot of the dust and imperfections and coffee spills and what have you have color. And you're going to be able to separate those out when you're cleaning up your photo. If you've done a color scan and if you've done a black and white scan, it just kind of all blends into the same mess and you won't have that advantage. The other thing is, a lot of times the color in a monochrome image contains additional detail that will help you bring out finer points of your image. You just get more when you get 3 channels rather than 1. And if you're going through the trouble to scan, you want to get what information you can out of your photos. Now, I'm going to skip through this and go down here. There is a sharpening routine that comes in the scanner. I don't use it. Descreening. Now, we're going to show an example of this a little later. Descreening is for when you scan a picture that's come out of a magazine or a newspaper, because those will be a series of spots rather than a more or less continuous surface. And the scanner does a really good job of basically filling in the gaps between the spots. And you can set it by how fine the detail is in what you're scanning. This thing will also adjust the color resolution and correct for background. There's a dust removal algorithm. And then down here is digitized, which we talked about before. Don't use high. If you use high, it'll muddy your images. And even be careful using it at all. Now, what to remember about digitized: it does not work on Kodachrome. It does not work on any black and white that is based on a silver emulsion, which means your standard black and white negatives, even your standard black and white prints from a few years back, not going to work digitalized. It will work on slides, as long as they're not Kodachrome, or prints that are in black and white but are actually printed through a color process. This works pretty slick. You can run a preview scan. Let me put a picture in here. Here we go. Run a preview scan. It works pretty quickly. Famous last words, he said. And then you can you can put a marquee around it, and then scan it off, and it will tell you where you want to save it. Get all your settings right before you go. So this is the interface to the scanner, and these are some of the choices that you have and that you need to bear in mind. Now, the next question is, how many dots per inch? It's got quite a range. Now, you know the optical resolution on this scanner is 6400 in one axis and 9600 in the other, and I don't know which is which. So the highest I would go with this is 6400. You're kidding yourself if you scan one of these higher levels, because it's just adding space. It's not adding any detail. It's not capable of that. 300 dots per inch is what most of your photos are printed at, although some printers print at 240. So if you're scanning at 300, it would make a pretty good one-to-one transfer. You can get 600 out of a lot of the old prints, because the old prints were generally made either direct onto the surface that you're viewing or with a larger format camera, and those will have more detail than you would think in the image, and you can usually print bigger than the original that you have and still carry over adequate detail. I would not go over 1200 very often, and if you're scanning slides, I would go all the way to 6400. I don't see any reason not to do that. These files can get large. I'm going to close this thing out. Close it. Goodbye. So that we can talk more about dots per inch. As I said, it's limited by the optical resolution of the scanner. It's also limited by the resolution of the original. If we go to Lightroom, now, just to kind of get us started on resolution, I included a couple of images that are not photos. This is a microscope slide that I laid in my scanner and scanned at 6400. Now, the reason to look at this is this kind of shows you the boundaries of what is there and what you can capture. Didn't come out too bad at 6400. You can zoom in, and certainly there's detail here. It's not perfect, but that's what you get. But then when you look at it under a microscope, you can see that there's a whole lot more detail here. This is a view at 4x, which is roughly equivalent to a 60,000 dot per inch scan, and shot with my regular camera, so it's a larger image. You can go in further, and you're seeing more detail, but there is a point where you run out of possibilities. It just doesn't get any sharper. And the reason for that, I'll show you one more quick image here. This is, what is this? This is about 40x, which just the pure magnification is about 580 dots per inch. But you're not going to get that, because I will show you. We're going to go here to scanning resolutions. I can enlarge this. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I wanted this. I just want to enlarge my screen. Well, let's try the old Control Plus routine. All right. These are the dimensions at different microscope resolutions. But because the length of the visible light waves are about 5 microns, 4 or 5 microns, or or 500 nanometers, one is the other. You can't go in further than half of the width of the light waves. And so, long story short, down here, you're really not going to get resolution larger than about 127 dots per inch, no matter what you do with a light microscope. So what I'm getting when I go way in on these pictures, when I go way in, I'm not getting any more resolution. I'm just getting a larger image of the resolution that I had. So let's look at a picture. This is a picture of an airplane that we took on a digital photo club trip over to McMinnville. How much resolution are we going to get out of this? Well, it was printed at 300 dots per inch. You're not going to get more resolution out of this image than there was when it was printed. It's just not going to be there. Now, you can zoom in closer. Whoop. And you scan closer and it doesn't get any sharper because that's all there is. There's no point in scanning an image to try and get greater resolution out of it than it was printed at in the first place. And so if you're scanning a digital image, there's no point in going over 300 dots per inch. You can't make it better than it ever was. Here's a picture of a kid shot probably 1950, I would say, maybe a little, no, probably before that, probably 1947. And this is scanned with too much resolution. Let me show you how you tell. See up here, when you zoom in 1:1, there is absolutely nothing that is pixel sharp. Let's go down here. This is about as close as it gets here on the edge of his shirt. So this was probably scanned at 1200 just to make a point. The point is that if you're going over 600, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your space. Even the lips, see, there's no real detail there. You're not going to make it better than it ever was. Here's another picture. We could increase the contrast on this. It wouldn't hurt it at all. Just to make it look a little sharper, increase the clarity, give it every chance. But come in here and look at these eyes. It just doesn't have the resolution. Now look up here. This is a 15,000 by 10,000 scan. I mean, it's scanned really close, probably 1200, but there's no point in it. My point is experiment a little. You don't want to leave data behind, but you don't want to get prints that are huge for no good reason. So do your first scan. Come in Lightroom, take a close look. Are you getting all the detail? Is there any point where you can look 1:1 and see that the pixels are crisp? If not, your scan is too large. However much you may want this thing to be big, it's not going there. Now, scanning slides. I've got several slides here that are scanned at 6,000. And you may think that 6,000 is not a lot, but when you come in on some of these, you find that they break down into pixels, even at this level. You see this? Going in further on this is not going to give you any more resolution in your end image. Oh, here's a nice little boy. But you come in close and you're seeing the grain in the film. Making that bigger, and we sure can, isn't going to give you information that helps your print or your reproduction be better. It's just going to make what's there bigger. So here we are. This is the same print. This is a crop of the same print. This is a picture of the same area from the microscope. We've got 10,000, or we've got about 10 times the resolution. And we've got all these little film crystals. Aren't they pretty? But they don't make your picture any better having them. Now, you can go in further on this, and you're not getting any additional resolution. So why go there? I think that this scan at 6,000 dots per inch is about as good as this picture is going to give you. Let's think a little bit about our digital cameras, because that'll help us do a comparison. I'm going to go here, and go here. Okay, what's the size of your image in megapixels? Well, if you've got a 20 megapixel image and you're printing at 300 dots per inch, your print size is going to max out at about 12 by 18. That's all you can get out of the pixels that you have. If you've got a 45 megapixel camera, your maximum print size, 27 by 18. That's not a whole lot to work with. And that's assuming that your focus is absolutely sharp. So you've got, pixel sharp resolution, and each pixel is distinct from the next one. It assumes that you've got no motion, either in you or in the subject. And it assumes that you've got a lens that's sharp enough to render pixel level resolution. You don't have to move very much, and you have blurred between adjacent pixels, and you do that, and your effective resolution drops by half, just that much, just that quick. So when we start thinking about, well, how big do we need to have in order to be comparable to the images that we are making with our digital cameras? If you've got a 24 by 36 slide and you're scanning at 6,000 dots per inch and printing at 300, you can see you're going to have about a 19 by 28 print. You go up to 72, you're right in there with the images that you're making on your digital camera. Don't think that you're losing anything when you scan it at 6,000 and that's all the resolution you got, because that's pretty comparable to all the resolution you're going to get out of your digital camera. So this has all been fun. Now, let's see. I am ready to switch Lightroom catalogs. Oh no, I got one more thing to do in this catalog before I go on. We want to look at these images. This is a picture out of a magazine. You can see that if you come in close, you've got that dot pattern that I talked about earlier. You can come in closer, and in order to get rid of that, I scanned at 600 and descreened and got this. And just to show you, it's not crystal sharp, but it's a whole lot better than what I had. And the scanner did that for me through the descreening process. Now, how are we going to fix this tear? Well, let's go to Photoshop and we're going to see if we can fix it. And I want this image. Window, come on. All righty. Well, never fail. We're just going to reload it. It's in here, but I don't know quite how to make it show. Let's try arrange. new window. Oh, you can use this command, this new window command, if you want 2 copies of your image up. So you can have one at full resolution and then one in close. You see where that was? Window, a window, arrange, and then this little thing at the bottom gives you a second window of the same image. All right, we're going to make this, well, I can't make it full screen here. First thing to do, if you're going to fix this, is you want to select both of these off of your bottom layer. So to save time, let me show you. I've copied this, and then I have selected each and put them on a separate layer. I'll turn these off. And now you've got these layers independently, and you can move them around. How you got that selection was, turn this one on, and then get your, you can use any of the selection tools, but I change my interface when I come in on here. This is what I want. This is my favorite polygon lasso tool. So here, 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 here. Whoop, that's not what I want. Shift, here, 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 here. All right, so I've cut this one out. If I Control J, it's going to give me a new layer with just the selection. All right, so what I want, I'm going to turn this off and go to the 2 layers that I've already made with the selection. Then you go to one of these layers. Let's go to the top one here and hit Control T for free transform. Now, let me tell you what not to do. Don't ever pull on these corners, because if you pull on the corners, it changes the scale of the image. The other thing that you want to do on this top layer is set the blend mode from normal to darker color. Now, when you move this, all right, Control T. When you move this around and you move it over the other one, you can see it, but when you move it over the white, then the white's going to disappear. So you can line these things up. So on one end, you move it in till it sort of fits. And then on the other end, you rotate. And then you move it in till it sort of fits. And you rotate. And you move it in so it sort of fits. Well, that sort of fits. Anyhow, that's the quick and dirty approach. You do it just like you would if you were doing it on paper. You don't change the scale. You move one side and you rotate the other. Move one side and rotate the other until you work it into where they fit. And then once you've got them together, you say, wow, that's wonderful. And you do a flattening, or you do a stamp visible, and your picture's back together. If you've got little places like this where it's not quite right, make you a new layer, get your clone tool or your patch tool, and just kind of work that a little. and it will disappear. It will all fit together nice. Now, I did this really fast. If I was really doing it, I'd spend a little more time on it. But you see what I've done. Back to Lightroom. This is a more involved example, but it's the same process. Move this in until it touches, rotate that. Move this in until it touches, rotate that, and you can knit these together. Now, it's time for me to change Lightroom catalogs. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff that I've shown down here, now's the time to ask, because it's going away. All right, we're going to go to the other Lightroom catalog because that's where the other images are. Did you see that I had included a Photoshop action to download in the links? I'll show you in a second what that is. It's not the be-all and end-all of this process, but it's a really good start, and it holds a person's workflow so that they can at least have a starting place. Now, I think this picture was probably taken about 1890, give or take 5 years. This is what's called a cabinet card picture. This particular photographer had a railroad car with a photo studio in it, and they would drag it from town to town, and they'd get all the townspeople to come and pay 35 cents a piece to have their picture taken. And when you look on the internet, there's really quite a few of these pictures. This is scanned at 600 dots per inch because that's really about all the resolution that I have. This is pretty realistic on this piece because you're getting all of the little hair, you're getting what eye detail is there, but you're not getting a lot of areas that are soft. It's pretty much, you get the detail that's there, and that's what you really want. So I wish when I had scanned this, I had moved the edges out from the margins. I'd put it in the scanner up against the corner. And I really get better scans if I leave a little bit of white space all the way around. Now, we're going to go from this original scan to this colorized scan. The question when you do this is, how far do you want to go and what do you want to make it look like? An argument can be made for keeping the original colors that were here because this was never a color image. An argument can be made for cleaning up some of this little stuff that's obviously damaged. And I won't say that there's a right or a wrong choice. You just have to figure out what choice you think makes the most sense consistent with what it is that you're trying to do. So when we take this thing to Photoshop, hello, Photoshop. This comes in with a lot of layers already done, so we don't have to sit and watch while we do a lot of fine work on this. When I'm starting out with an image, I will usually start by making some selections and then saving those as channels. Here I've got channels saved for the photo itself, the background behind the people, the clothing on the child. There was an area of the dress that I was working. If you make selections, then when you're painting up to the edge or doing corrections up to the edge, let's control click on the background. Go back to to our layers and see the background is selected. So if I have a kind of correction that I want to apply only to the background, I can pull that in. The other reason I do this is that I want those borders to be the same every time I work. So if I'm working on the background and then later I want to work on her dress, I want this line to be in the same place. I don't want to be reselecting. I want to be saving the selection and then bringing it back in again to use again. So we're going to go back to our layers, go to the bottom. Everything you notice is turned off. And just for grins, we're going to run that action. Now I need to go up here to plugins, get my CRX module, which is part of the Tony Kuiper package. It just makes it easier for me to see what I'm doing if I work off of this. So in here, first of all, I want to get rid of that selection. And I want to run that action. And it's going to make some layers for me. It made a copy of the photo as a smart object. And it applied a dust and scratches filter. And it put a black mask on it. So even though it's done this, you're not going to see it. It's got a layer to clone onto, set to darker color. Now, the reason I like to do that is a lot of times your imperfections in these photos are either going to be lighter or darker than the background. And here's one for lighter color. And so, for example, if I clone up here, let's make it a little bigger. So I want to get rid of that. If I just start ordinary cloning, whoop, I want to make that bigger. I'm going to carry over all of the imperfection that I've got and put it in a new place. But if I clone and I've got darker selected, got to be on current and below, darker selected, I wipe out the stuff that's darker, but I don't affect the stuff that's lighter. And so you can do a lot of cleaning up just like that without really destroying what else is going on in your image. Here, let me go in further. Here to scratch down the middle of this lady's face. Well, we're going to just do a quick and dirty clone, pick up there, right down here, and see how easy it is to get something like that out without disrupting what's going on in the rest of the photograph. Let's go back down here to dust and scratches. I'm going to invert this mask so you can actually see what the dust and scratches filter is doing. It's taking out a lot of the small stuff. Now you can adjust it here. You can change the radius and the threshold. Now this is really important because I'll often run dust and scratches more than once with different settings in different parts of the picture. The radius is how many pixels is it blurring together? How wide is it? And generally 2 or 3 is a good place to start. Otherwise you start destroying detail that you'd really like to keep. So we'll put this back on 2. It's got to be big enough that it's cleaning up your little imperfections like these little white dots, but yet not so big that it's costing you resolution where you want to keep it. The other question is threshold. Threshold is how different the pixels need to be in order to be blended. If I move it over here and require an unreasonable amount of difference between the pixels, it doesn't do anything. But if I move it in a little at a time until it's taking out the garbage that I want taken out, but not taking out detail that I want to keep. I can be very selective with this, and that makes it work a whole lot better. Okay, I'm going to do that. Okay, I showed you the darker color and the lighter color approach. And then I will also have a normal layer because some things you're not going to get out. And then up here is a contrast adjustment. So I am going to go back down here, turn off all the layers, go up to where I had worked in the finished image and run through these things so you can see what happened with the finished image. That's the dust and scratches that I ran. Now notice here that I have painted with black on the mask to preserve her eyes and her lips and similar details on the other parties, because dust and scratch will flatten out details, and there are particular details that you don't want to lose. And so you just black them out on the mask on the dust and scratches. Darker color, there wasn't a whole lot of areas. You can see some of them here that were where I wanted something darker. Lighter color, wow. Cleans up a lot of stuff quickly. Now it's quickly here, but it wasn't so quickly when I was painting this stuff in. Normal layer, I had a little bit of color in here that I had just cloned softly to kind of, clone with a low flow to just kind of soften some of this. Here I left this around this word because whoa, golly. This was getting kind of intricate around this, but I had a difference in darkness. So I knew that I could make a mask that would take that out. And so I did a luminosity mask and set it for the difference in the color. I'll turn this off, go here, open this, and make this bigger. Okay, I want this darkness level. Okay, so now I want to see my mask. Okay, so I've got some separation, but I can run a curves adjustment on the mask and play with this so that I've got it selected pretty much for selecting the type, not the background. Now I'm going to apply this to my layer. And here's the mask. I want to invert this. Now, when I clone, I'm hoping when I clone, got to get on the right layer. On here, I'm going to make this larger. I'm going to be reckless here. What are my settings on my clone? It's only 17%. I'm reckless. I'm going to put it on 100, set it up here for starts, and come down here. All right, I didn't get the exact mask that I wanted on this quick little demo, but here I did on the one that I did before. Then I stamped it and I multiplied it. Now, if you multiply, you can select the opacity that you want, and I just have selected the outer edge. You can select the opacity you want to see how much more darkness you want to put into that type to make it kind of look like it's supposed to be. So that was the trick that was used there. Then I ran a frequency separation. Now, you probably have an action on your machine for frequency separation. In the TK panel, it's right here. You click that, and it sets up these layers. And it gives you a layer to fix color and a layer to fix texture. Now, a lot of times, up here in these people's faces, especially on these old pictures, the texture is going to be pretty rough. And you can paint in with a low flow rate, a little bit of softening. What you're really doing is you've got the mask, and we'll turn off the mask for a second. You see, this is no effect at all. And then you paint with black on that white mask, and it brings in that softening where you want it. You can adjust when you run the frequency separation how much effect you want to have. So I'll be right here. Okay, it should run. This is way too much blur. It's just a Gaussian blur. You can also get a different kind of frequency separation with a surface blur, but you want enough to get rid of the crap and not so much that you're losing, you want this enough to blur the places that you want to blur the most, enough to accomplish your goals. And then you put a mask on this, and going to paint in black with a low flow rate, and going to make it bigger so it's easier to see. And you can just paint in a little smoothness where you want it and not paint it in where you don't want it. The other layer is color. And sometimes you've got bad colors. And you can get in on this color blur layer, and I want to clone. No, I think I want to paint. Get my brush. Where's someplace that's got really rotten colors? Well, this isn't any too good. I can sample, and then I can paint on this. And you see the texture is on the other layer. And so all I'm doing here is fixing the tone and taking out some areas that had been stained more yellow than I really wanted. See, I can clean him up a little bit. So we're going to go up the tree a little further. Okay, we've got the frequency separation on that I did. Now I made a stamp visible layer and ran this curves adjustment that comes with the action. We did all this stuff. The original action, it only gave us like 3 layers down here, 4 layers. But this is that curves layer. And now we've done all these other things below it. We're going to find it. We're going to turn it on. And that will really improve our contrast. Now, let me show you what this curves layer is. In curves, in the properties, if you alt-click on the auto button, you get this menu. And there are different ways that it will calculate the curves adjustment. Generally speaking, this is the one, enhance per channel contrast. that I like to use on these photo restorations. That should be the default one when it runs. I may have changed it to this for this particular photo, but generally this one is the one that I run. And it seems to use, well, it uses all three channels to bring as much contrast, as much distinction as I can get between the layers. And at this point, the black and white photo is finished for my purposes. Now, you know it's not black and white. You can make it black and white if you want to, but I like to retain some of the tone of the original piece. I particularly try to retain the tone of the original piece in the frame, but I can always make it black and white, but I will lose data when I do that. And so I will save it at this point, and I'll add a frame around it. This framing is really pretty easy to do. It's worth demonstrating. Back up. If you've got, let's turn off a lot of things here. This one good? Okay, I'm going to turn off everything but this. Now I've got this sitting on a transparent background. So how do you get rid of the transparency? You go up here and click Image, Trim. And I'm going to trim based on transparent pixels on all sides. Bang, just like that. He said it trimmed all those edges. All right, now you want to put a frame around it. How are you going to do that? Well, go up here to Image, Canvas Size, and don't mess with it in inches, mess with it in percent. And give it the same change in percent on each level. Let's give it 15% additionally on each level. Have this set in the middle. And it's going to expand out. And now you've got an even number of pixels on all sides. And the best part is this is proportional to the width, and this is proportional to the height. If you wanted an even amount, then you could not use a percentage. So at this point, you probably want to put a fill layer underneath. You make those here, click and add a solid color, and then it's going to ask you what color you want. Well, let's be radical. And it's going to make a fill layer that's that color. That's pretty bad, huh? Next, I colorize. Now, to colorize, you take this layer, the one that you had finished with in the black and white, and have it be the only one open. Then you click on Filters. Well, if you're really smart, you make this into a smart object before you start so you can adjust it. But I'm not that smart. Filter, Neural Filter. Here they are, only they're on the screen you can't see. Colorize, turn it on. Auto color image is checked. I don't fool with anything. I just have it put me out a new layer. And I've got a new layer and it's got some problems. It always does have some problems. So what I will do then is I will make a new layer on top, a new blank layer, and then paint color. Here, I'm going to make a new layer above this, change the blend mode to color. get my brush, and I'm going to do this rough because I want to do it fast. Let's make this bigger. All right, that's big enough. Hold down the Alt key to get my eyedropper, select the color, and then just paint. And you've fixed the imperfections in the color. Go get my eyedropper. Just that quick. Well, it's not that quick if you're doing a good job, but that's how you get this color correction layer that fixes the things that Colorized didn't do. Then I flatten the image, and I've got a finished color image, and I want to put a frame around it. But what color frame do I want? Well, I could match the dress simply by okay, I've got to drag this layer up here so it's on top of the things I'm putting underneath it. This, all I did was I got my eyedropper here, went on to the image, Alt-clicked on the dress, got that color here in my picker, made a new layer, and there we have it. Now I've got that around the edge. Or we're going to go back to our color picker, get this. Come on, be good. Got to be on the right layer. All right. Brush this layer, alternate, pick color. Okay, now I've got this open. See this number? I'm going to copy it. 663333. And then we're going to go to the internet. Going to click on the Adobe Color Wheel. I'm going to paste the number right here. And now you can find analogous colors. You can find complementary colors. I ended up, you can get all kinds of colors that will work together. I kind of like this one myself, and I think that's one of the ones I chose. But let's not do that because I want to show you something different. Let's choose this one. I'm going to copy it. Come back to Lightroom, or back to Photoshop. I'm going to paste it right in here. Now we've got that color. And when we make a new solid color layer, which is here, solid color, okay, we carried that color in from the color wheel on the Adobe website. So here we go. We've got all this. And that's kind of the story on this picture. Now, I'm ready to move on unless people have questions about this image. All right. Put this one to sleep. No, we're not going to keep it. So now this is going to be much shorter, but I want to show this because this is a very common problem with these sepia toned images. You get this blue damage and it's just awful to work with, and you need to get rid of it. So let me see which one of these has the layers in it. This has the layers in it. I want to open this one in Photoshop. Okay, this is another one where I would select the photo and correct that separate from the frame because I like these old frames. So down here on channels, I've got this photo already selected. Control click on it and go back to layers. And see, I've got just that quick, I've got the selection brought in from the channels panel. Now, I'll go through these by turning layers on just to make it quicker for you. If you do a black and white correction, which is down here, you select that, select black and white, and then you set the blend mode to luminosity, you can use these sliders to affect the brightness or darkness of different colors without changing the tones. So a lot of times, if you just will do that, drop these blues, cyans, and magentas, you can make a huge improvement in getting rid of that. You know, the problem with it is that it's light. The next thing I did was I did a mask. Let's go here. Let's go here. I did a color mask. Only I got to get rid of some of this stuff. I want to be on the background only. So I'm going to do a color mask. I want to select this blue because that's what I want to get rid of. Okay. Now, well, I want to make that brighter for sure because I want the mask to have more effect. All right. Now I run a hue and saturation adjustment with this mask. And it's in the wrong place. I want it here. I want this on and this on. And now what I'm going to do is desaturate those blues further and maybe darken them just a little bit further. And already I've made quite a difference in cleaning this up. You can also use some color blur as part of a frequency separation to get out more of it. And you can clean that blue up and turn what was pretty much a ruined picture into something that is, you know, passable. So that's how you clean up that blue mess on these, should have saved that, on these sepias. I'm going to go quickly here. This is an example of a photo that's been, whoa, something went screwy. Bring this back. Remember this character here. We're going to see him again in a minute. This is colorized out. Picture taken in about 1902. I'm guessing this girl here was 3. She was born in 1899. This is what you see when you pick up some of the old photo books. This is just a whole page out of this photo book. There's a couple of things here worth seeing. This was taken, this is the same girl, the little girl before, she's probably about 10. So this would be about 1909, 1910, somewhere in there. But this is a studio picture, and you've got some roughness that you can take out with frequency separation with the toning. But you've got a lot of good, sharp detail. Look at these eyes. I mean, there's detail in the iris, in these eyes, and in these lips. Even though, you know, this picture can blow up quite a bit larger than the original. And then along in the last half of the 1920s, pictures went to crap because people started buying cameras and taking them home. And you started getting these kinds of out of focus, muddy shots. I mean, there's only so much you're going to be able to do with that. Some of these are important family pictures, but you go from these beautiful shots to all kinds of these and very little of the studio shots. And then you got this guy down here. This is November 1963. This is the guy that we saw over here a minute ago, right here. Only now he is at his 50th wedding anniversary. This is an important family shot. So all I want to show you is what a difference it makes when you colorize this image. This was shot black and white, colorize it with just a little bit of painting around it. See, he doesn't trust her with that knife. He's got his hand on her, make sure she doesn't do anything screwy. But this kind of change can be a real gift to your family because it brings important family photos back to life. When you're doing these pictures, a lot of times I will make several versions of the same shot because I can't decide which I like better. This is the colorized version. This is pretty good, but there's no reason you can't save more than one as you go. Here's a lady. She wasn't too bad. Here's the colorized version, and it looks really pretty. Now, this hasn't been sharpened yet, but it's going to sharpen up really nice. There's a lot of detail here. And this is the final image I want to show. This is not an old image, but I want to show it because of the way Colorize works with it. And it illustrates an important principle in that neural filter. When you open this in Photoshop, and you turn on this layer, which is a duplicate copy. This is the kind of colorizing you can do with neural filters. Now, I want to turn this off, take this layer, go to neural filters, and show you how to do this. Actually, what I want to do, this is a smart object. Nope. All right. Well, I'm going to go to neural filters with this filter, neural filter, colorize, turn it on. See this box here? Auto color image. All right. This is the violence that it's doing to it with auto color image checked. Turn it off. You go back to your original image. Then go over here to the thumbnail and alt click on the thumbnail. And it's going to ask you, well, what color do you want to make this? So we're going to make it blue. Okay, so now it's adding blue up in here. Oh, there it comes. You can alt click on this and drag it to make another one to include more areas in this adjustment. Okay, now I can go down here, but I don't want this to be blue. I want it to be red. So I click on here, delete this, red. Like 0, red, 255. Why not go all out? Okay, now it's colorizing using the color that I just chose, Alt-click, drag it around a little bit, get another one to color a larger area. Now, just for grins, I'm going to do one more of these. And go over here and change it to green. So I want 0 in there. And put green at 255. Ooh, that's green, isn't it? And that's coming in here. We can do this in a way that will blend these colors. Put it here. Let's put another one up here. And see how that is a lot easier than using the old system where you would isolate an area and then click the hue and saturation and then adjust the hue. This makes a much smoother and easier transition. And it's because you've got the auto color image off. Now, if you have auto color on, you can use these same kind of points to make adjustments within your image. But if you turn it off, then you're adjusting the colors in the original image. So I'm going to click OK. Happy day. Turn this off, turn on the one that I made before I started. And that is the show for tonight. Does anyone have questions? Turn your microphones on if you like.
Well, I like how you removed the blue from that one image, the gradiated blue, because I've had challenges doing something like that.
Oh, and when you darken that, a lot of times you'll get detail coming up through that you couldn't see before. I have one. Let's go up here where you haven't been. Folders. Now we're going to see all my dirty little secrets. Control. We're going to go down here to this navy boy here. Okay, he's got this stain on him, same as what we've seen before. But when you clean that up, all of a sudden you can see detail underneath that you wouldn't have known was there. While we're on this character, this hat, it's a great place to use dust and scratches, but you would just, when you want to clean up whites, adjust your not the radius, but the other one, the bottom slider, the one that adjusts how
threshold.
Threshold, thank you. Adjust that carefully and you can get just enough correction to pull out the dirt, but yet leave the texture of the fabric underneath so that you can still see the part that you want to see. This is another example of a picture where if you clean up with dust and scratches, you can take the little garbage out of this white wedding dress and yet not destroy the texture of the dress. So, this, by the way, is my grandmother. So let's go back over here so that you can see that I really do exist. I'm happy to answer questions. You know, I appreciate that you come and listen to all this. I really hope there are some things that are valuable for you. Yeah, Carol. I can't hear you, Carol.
So I don't have a printer and I don't have a scanner. What I was doing is probably the next best thing. My goal is just preservation only. No size restrictions or printing or anything like that. I've just been taking photos of the photos and then bringing them digitally into Photoshop and trying to work them over.
Well, you know,
Probably the hard way, but
that might be okay. Look critically at your results. And if you're getting the quality that you want, then what you're doing is just fine. Now, there are a lot of scanners out there. This scanner is designed for photos primarily, but I use it for photos and work and whatever else. But scanners that are primarily business scanners, you know, like the scanners that are sometimes on fax machines even, they may be good enough for black and white. My advice is try what you've got, see if you can make it work.
There's, I don't know where it is right now, but I bought it a couple years ago to do slides, and it literally screws onto the filter threads, and you just drop the slide in and click away, and it was pretty slick.
Those can be quite good. The thing that I've always had trouble with slides is a little bit of dust on a photo like this, and you're not going to have trouble. But if you have a little bit of dust on a slide, you're going to end up with a lot of problems pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's what I found.
What I like is this stuff. It's kind of expensive, but you can use this right on your emulsions. Now, don't use it on anything that is porous, like these old pictures that are, you know, would soak it up. But you can use it on negatives, you can use it on slides, you can use it on more modern prints that have a sealed finish, and it will wipe up an awful lot of that garbage. The problem is you start wiping it up, and before long, you've got more dust than you had when you started. So you can use a little brush, or you can get these pads that are pretty much dust-free, and you put the two together, and you can do a lot to clean up a lot of these photos.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that link, again, is one of those that's in the, you know, as a comment to the program.
Oh yeah, on your most recent email.
Well, when you look down here, I'll share again real quickly. Go to Photo Club. So let's see, this is top one, talks about the products for cleaning slides and the sheets that can work. This one talks about some of these spreadsheets that I did. You know, if people could get the idea that I'm a bit of a nerd, they wouldn't be altogether wrong. But I love playing with these spreadsheets and these graphs because I can see what's happening as I make changes, you know, in very clear ways rather than just having to imagine it. Being able to put in how many megapixels your camera has and put in the dots per inch that you want to print and know how big you can go, you know, it just makes it simple.
Okay. All right.
Play with these things. If you've got more questions, get a hold of me. Have a good time. Don't be frustrated if it's taking serious time to do the first photo. Yeah, sometimes they take serious time if they've got serious damage. And use that action. That action will give you a big head start.
Okay.
So happy day, happy night. Thanks for coming. Keep a
Thank
smile.
you, Max.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thank you, Max.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
seeing you all.
Thank you. Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.